Professional wrestling's premature mortality rate might have gotten a lot better in recent years, but for a while there it felt like a month wouldn't go by without news that a wrestler had shuffled off this mortal coil before their time. A decent amount of them were performers from the 80s and 90s, and while you've likely heard about the more notable former WCW stars who died in their 20s and 30s, there are other, perhaps more obscure or otherwise forgotten former WCW wrestlers who befell the same fate. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WCW wrestlers who died way too young. Join us. Number 10, Joey Maggs. Jumpin' Joey Maggs was a wrestler who, at the time, was looked at as being too big to be an effective cruiserweight, but way too small to be an effective heavyweight. As a result, Maggs, a decent worker, became an enhancement talent, primarily wrestling for WCW from 1991 to 1998. Described as somebody who truly loved professional wrestling and was just happy to be in the business, Joey was close with people like Arn Anderson and Terry Taylor and was said to have idolized Brian Pillman. He also worked enhancement matches for WWE during this era and took great pride in making his opponents look good. And he got to do that for some big-time stars too, including Paul Orndorff, Lex Luger, Sid Vicious, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, and more. In his final match, he became another victim of Goldberg's winning streak, after which he retired due to a shoulder injury. Out of the business for 8 years, Maggs sadly passed away from cardiac arrest in his hometown of Baltimore, Maryland on October 15, 2006. He was just 39 years old. Number 9, Emory Hail. Standing over 6.5 feet tall and weighing in at over 300 pounds of beefy muscle, Emory Hail was always going to get opportunities in pro wrestling. And despite Hale's inexperience, his impressive size and look convinced Jimmy Hart to bring him to WCW, where he was earmarked as a future opponent for none other than Hulk Hogan. It didn't quite work out that way, with Hale's initial televised matches seeing him do jobs for already established stars, but Hart and Hogan planned to run with the formula for the newly launched XWF following WCW's demise. The Hulkster pulled out of the promotion, however, and the XWF folded shortly after it began. Hale may have chosen to go back to work in Puerto Rico, but kidney issues, which resulted in him undergoing a transplant in 2003, put an end to his in-ring career. While working out on January 26, 2006, Hale threw up blood and went to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. That night, he developed a high fever and his kidneys shut down. Just a day later, his mother made the decision to take him off of life support. He was 36 years old. Number 8, Louis Spicoli. A 17-year-old Louis Spicoli had his very first match ever on WWE television, working as a jobber to put over Ron Bass on an episode of Superstars. It was a dream come true for Louis, who had been a huge wrestling fan during his teenage years, and he would continue to act as a human punching bag in enhancement matches for the promotion before venturing out for further experience. After a spell in Herb Abrams' UWF and a tour of FMW in Japan, Spicoli got a gig in Mexico's AAA, where he worked as Madonna's boyfriend. He then signed up with WWE and performed as Rad Radford before Louis' outside-the-ring excesses caught up with him, and he was released after publicly overdosing on somas and ending up in hospital. The Wild West of ECW wasn't exactly the environment to help Spicoli's drug issues, and Paul Heyman ended up letting him go after fearing he would have the next pro wrestling tragedy on his hands. That just delayed the inevitable, however, as Louis' issues continued when he signed with WCW. Less than a week after his 27th birthday, Spicoli OD'd on somas and wine and choked on his own vomit. Number 7, Chase Tatum. Chase Tatum was working as a personal trainer when a member of the WCW roster suggested that with his bodybuilder's physique, he should give pro wrestling a try. After training at the power plant, Tatum made his in-ring debut against none other than Goldberg. No prizes for guessing who won that one. He would also wrestle and lose to Scott Steiner, Scott Norton, and Van Hammer before being added to the No Limit Soldiers group. WCW didn't pan out and he left the company in the summer of 1999. A match against some young kid called the Prototype in UPW was his last notable bout, after which he worked as a road manager and personal assistant for rap group Outkast and had a role in the film Who's Your Caddy? Sadly, Tatum was one of the many wrestlers who suffered from substance abuse problems and had reportedly had a major pill addiction for years when he passed away of an accidental drug overdose on March 23, 2008, 10 days after undergoing back surgery. The 34-year-old had been openly talking about seeking help for his addictions shortly before his untimely demise. Number 6. The Renegade. Richard Wilson was a Georgia native who trained in the New England area while working as an exotic dancer. He was clearly limited in the ring, but his striking look got him work on the indies and for the Japanese war promotion as Rio Lord of the Jungle. Because of his resemblance to one Jim Hellwig, Wilson was brought to WCW by Hulk Hogan as his ultimate surprise at Uncensored 1995 after WCW had balked to Hellwig's monetary demands. Essentially an Ultimate Warrior knockoff, Wilson may have had the wild hair and the tassels and the mannerisms, but he wasn't the genuine article, and the gimmick flopped, despite WCW booking him to win the television title. After dropping the belt, the Renegade became a jobber, and while Wilson continued to attend classes at the power plant, he showed very little improvement and was released in early '99 after failing a steroid test. With no other offers coming in and facing a precarious financial situation, Wilson fell into a serious depression, and while having an argument with his girlfriend at the home they shared, he pulled out a gun and turned it on himself, ending his own life at the age of just 33. Number 5. Bobby Dunham Jr. After persistent injuries curtailed a promising football career, Bobby Dunham Jr. decided to follow in his father's footsteps and get into the professional wrestling business. After wrestling locally in Texas during his first couple of years, Bobby secured a steady gig with All Japan in the mid-90s, where he teamed with Stan Hansen and became close friends with fellow gaijin Rob Van Dam. Dunham Jr. joined RVD in Extreme Championship Wrestling in 1997, but left both All Japan and Paul Heyman's promotion when WCW offered him a far more lucrative 3-year deal. Outside of his work as a member of the West Texas Rednecks, however, the second-generation star didn't do a whole lot in WCW and found himself on the injured list after having surgery on his shoulder and knee. Well known within the business as somebody who liked to party, Dunham Jr.'s substance abuse issues only worsened when he was on the sidelines, not helped by the emotional burden he felt while going through a divorce from the mother of his 2 kids. Sadly, it wasn't a major shock to his contemporaries when Bobby was found dead of a fentanyl overdose on January 24, 2000 at the age of just 34. Number 4. Art Barr. Though Art Barr achieved greater fame later on due to his Los Gringos Locos AAA tag team with Eddie Guerrero, his first real break in the United States came with World Championship Wrestling. The son of Oregon promoter and former wrestler Sandy Barr, Art worked for Don Owens' Pacific Northwest Wrestling territory in the late 1980s before signing a deal with WCW in September of 1990. Coming in as the Juicer, Barr portrayed a gimmick very similar to the title character of the movie Beetlejuice and was a hit with kids. However, a serious criminal conviction Art received during his time in Oregon led to a successful campaign to get him fired, and he was released after just a few months. In truth, it didn't seem like his career was about to go anywhere fast, since he was stuck working opening matches and Booker Ole Anderson had flat out told him he wouldn't be getting a push due to his smaller size. That smaller size didn't hinder him south of the border, where as American Love Machine, Barr became a bona fide lucha libre star. Just a couple of weeks after wrestling the biggest and best match of his life at the When Worlds Collide pay-per-view, Art passed away from a drug-related heart attack at the age of just 28. Number 3. Dino Casanova. Baltimore, Maryland's Dino Casanova worked for various US territories and indie promotions, including Eastern Championship Wrestling in the early to mid-90s, often teaming with fellow journeyman Rip Sawyer as the Cream Team. Casanova made one appearance for WWE, tagging with Chris Hamrick in a loss to the Smoking Guns during a 1994 episode of Wrestling Challenge, before getting steadier enhancement work with WCW in 1995 and 1996. Initially tagging with sometimes indie partner Romeo Valentino as the Goodfellas, dubbed the Flying Linguinis by commentator Bobby Heenan, Casanova mostly worked singles matches, putting stars such as Sting, Randy Savage, and others over on shows like Main Event, Worldwide, Saturday Night, Prime, and WCW Pro. After that, Dino faded from the business, save for the occasional match in his hometown. The next anyone really heard of Valentino was the news that he had passed away of a heart attack on March 1st, 2002 at the age of 35. Number 2. The Wall. Jerry Toot first trained with Larry Sharp and worked for various independent promotions and even trained at the WCW power plant prior to getting a couple of shots in ECW as Hellraiser. A big man standing at close to 7 feet tall and weighing over 300 pounds, Jerry got his break with WCW WCW in 1999, first as the bodyguard of Berlin, hence the Wall, and then as a singles wrestler. He memorably had a short program with Hogan, now notorious for the promo where Hulk seemingly saw him standing on top of a large building from about a mile away. When WCW went out of business, Jerry's contract was picked up by WWE, but the company washed their hands of him after learning of his drug issues, specifically a heroin addiction, which had nearly killed him and led to a stint in rehab. He showed up in early-day TNA as Malice and worked other indies before securing a full-time gig with All Japan Pro Wrestling in 2003. It was just a day after the end of his final tour of the year that Jerry was found dead of a heart attack in his Narita hotel room. He was 36 years old. Number 1. The Ultimate Solution. Robert Swenson, who to his friends was known as Jeep, was brought into the wrestling business by Bruiser Brody following an unsuccessful go at boxing. Reportedly possessing the largest biceps in the world, the positively monstrous Swenson wrestled for World Class in Texas in the late 80s, then resurfaced in the Lone Star State for the Global Wrestling Federation in 1993. As the biggest man who trained at the famed Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California, accusations of steroid abuse were routinely leveled at Swenson, who, to be fair, wasn't exactly shy about his intake. It was his freakish physique that got him a one-shot deal with WCW, where he was brought in as part of the Alliance to End Hulkamania. Initially called the Final Solution, WCW changed it to the Ultimate Solution once it was drawn to their attention just how horrifically offensive the original choice may be. After wrestling his lone WCW bout to the disastrous Doomsday Cage Match main event of Uncensored 1996, Swenson played the role of Bane in the not quite as disastrous Batman and Robin film. Sadly, Swenson would pass away of a massive heart attack after his organs had failed him at the age of 40, just 2 months after the film's premiere. His close friend Davey Boy Smith gave a eulogy at the funeral.